A tiny golden puppy lay tied to a tree in a frozen city park. The rope cut into his fur. His body shook so hard he could no longer cry. Winter had already decided he would not last the night. On that same path, a man named Ethan Walker walked through the snow, not searching for life, but avoiding it. He had lost his daughter years ago in a winter storm, and since then he never stopped moving. Then he heard it. Not a bark, just a breath that refused to disappear. In that moment, Ethan had a choice: walk away like everyone else, or stay and risk losing everything again. What he did next would change 2 broken lives forever. Before we begin, tell me, where are you watching from? Drop your country in the comments below.
Snow fell steadily over Minneapolis, muting the city into a pale, breathless hush. Streetlights blurred into soft halos, and the park lay nearly empty, its paths erased by white, its trees stripped bare against the winter sky. Ethan Walker had not planned to walk through the park that night. He rarely planned anything anymore. At 46, he moved through his days by habit rather than intention, letting time carry him the way a frozen river carries debris slowly, without resistance. The cold did not bother him much. It never had. Or maybe he had simply learned to ignore discomfort, the way one learns to ignore a dull ache that never quite goes away. He wore a dark wool coat, old but well kept, the collar turned up against the wind. Snow dusted his short brown hair, already threaded with gray, and clung to the edges of his untrimmed beard. His face was angular, sharp in places where weight had been lost and never regained. Deep lines cut down from the corners of his eyes, not from laughter, but from years of holding things in. People who met Ethan often described him as quiet, distant, polite in a careful way, as if he were afraid that too much warmth might crack something open. He walked with his hands in his pockets, boots crunching softly, eyes fixed ahead. He was almost past the stand of trees near the center of the park when he heard it. Not a bark, not even a whine, just a sound, thin, broken, barely there. A breath that did not belong to the wind. Ethan stopped. For a moment, he told himself it was nothing. Snow made strange noises, metal shrank, branches shifted. The city was full of ghosts that were not really there. He took another step, then another, trying to convince himself to keep moving. The sound came again, this time closer. Ethan turned toward the trees. It took him several seconds to see what was wrong. At first he noticed only the rope, a pale line against the dark bark of an old oak, hanging too low, too taut. Then he saw the small shape at the base of the tree, the puppy. It was a golden retriever, no more than 2 or 3 months old. Too young to understand cold, too young to understand abandonment. Its fur, a soft pale gold, was matted with snow and damp where it pressed into the ground. The rope looped around its narrow chest and neck, thin but cruel, biting into the downy fur as if it had been pulled tight in a hurry. The knot was high on the trunk, out of reach of small paws that had clearly tried and failed to free themselves. The puppy's body trembled in shallow, uneven bursts. Its belly was flattened against the ice-hard snow, legs folded awkwardly beneath it, as if standing had become impossible some time ago. One ear lay bent under its head. The other twitched weakly at the sound of Ethan's footsteps. Ethan crouched slowly. "Hey," he said, his voice rough from disuse. "Hey there." The puppy lifted its head just enough to look at him. Its eyes were dark brown and far too large for its thin face. They were dull with exhaustion, rimmed with red, yet still painfully alert, watching, searching. There was no panic in them, only a quiet, desperate awareness. The kind that comes after fear has burned itself out. Something tight and familiar closed around Ethan's chest. He reached out, then stopped himself. The puppy did not move. It did not pull away. It did not whimper. It only watched him, breath fluttering in small, uneven puffs that fogged the air for half a second before vanishing. Ethan's gaze dropped to the rope. He could see where the skin beneath the fur was compressed, how the puppy's chest barely expanded when it breathed. His fingers curled into his palm inside his glove. Too tight. Whoever had tied it had not checked, or had checked and not cared. Ethan swallowed. He had not thought about that night in years. Not directly, not like this. But the cold had a way of dragging memory to the surface, of making the past feel immediate and sharp. For an instant, he was no longer in the park. He was on a snow-choked highway, hazard lights blinking uselessly through whiteout conditions, his phone pressed to his ear while a small voice cried in the back seat. He forced the thought away. "Easy," he murmured, though he wasn't sure whether he was speaking to the puppy or to himself. He reached for the rope. The puppy flinched, not away but inward, its head lowered, chin brushing the snow, body tensing as if bracing for pain that had already been taught. A faint sound escaped its throat, not loud enough to be called a cry. Ethan froze. "I'm not—" He stopped, exhaling slowly. "I'm not going to hurt you." His fingers closed around the rope. It was stiff with cold, rough against his gloves. He tugged gently, testing the knot. It didn't give. The puppy's breath hitched. Its eyes squeezed shut for a moment, then opened again, glassy and resigned. Ethan released the rope immediately. "I'm sorry," he said, too quickly. "I'm sorry." The word tasted bitter in his mouth. He had said it once before, years ago, into a phone that had already gone quiet. He had meant it then, too. It hadn't changed anything. Snow gathered silently on his shoulders as he knelt there, staring at the small, trembling body at the base of the tree. The park around them was empty. No voices, no footsteps, no sign that anyone else had noticed, or would notice, what had been left behind. Ethan glanced around, then back at the puppy. "How long have you been here?" he asked softly. The puppy didn't answer, of course. It only shuddered again, a tremor that traveled from its shoulders down to its thin hind legs. Ethan pulled off his glove and reached out again, slower this time. He placed his bare hand against the puppy's side. Cold. Not the sharp cold of snow, but the deeper, wrong kind. The kind that told him this was no longer just discomfort. It was danger. His heart began to pound, not fast, but heavy, like something waking from a long sleep. He straightened slightly, breath fogging in front of his face. He could leave. Someone else would come, someone with tools, someone whose life wasn't already fractured along invisible seams. The thought didn't hold. Ethan looked down at the puppy again. Its eyes were still on him, waiting, not begging, just waiting. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out his phone. As he stood there under the bare branches, snow collecting quietly on his hair and shoulders, Ethan Walker realized he did not know if this small, fragile life could be saved. He also realized, with a clarity that frightened him, that walking away would break something in him that had only just begun to ache again. The rope finally gave way under Ethan's trembling hands. He worked slowly, carefully, afraid that one wrong pull might stop the shallow rise and fall of the puppy's chest altogether. When the knot loosened, he slipped his arm beneath the small body and lifted it against him. The puppy weighed almost nothing too light, as if hunger and cold had already taken parts of it away. Its fur soaked through Ethan's coat instantly, icy and stiff, and yet the little body pressed closer, instinctively seeking warmth. Ethan stood there for a second longer than necessary, snow gathering on his shoulders, his breath coming shallow now. Then he pulled his phone from his pocket and dialed Emergency Animal Rescue. His voice sounded strange to his own ears, flat, controlled, too calm for what his hands were doing. He gave the location, described the puppy, listened to the operator's assurances. Help was on the way. 15 minutes, maybe 20. Too long, a part of him whispered. He wrapped his coat tighter around the puppy, crouching low to block the wind. The puppy did not resist. Its head rested weakly against Ethan's chest, eyes half-lidded now, blinking slowly as if staying awake required more effort than it could afford. "Stay with me," Ethan murmured, the words slipping out before he could stop them. "Just stay." The rescue vehicle arrived with flashing lights that reflected off the snow like distant fire. Two figures hurried toward him. One was a young woman bundled in a thick red parka, her dark hair pulled into a practical ponytail. Her name, Ethan would later learn, was Lina Morales, a field rescue technician in her early 30s. She was slim, quick-moving, her face sharp and focused despite the cold, brown eyes already scanning the puppy with professional urgency. The second was the driver, a broad-shouldered man with a graying beard who said little and moved efficiently, already preparing a thermal blanket. Lina knelt beside Ethan, her breath visible in short bursts. "Hypothermia," she said quietly, not as a question. "How long was he tied?" "I don't know," Ethan replied. His jaw tightened. "Too long." They transferred the puppy carefully onto the blanket, checking gums, pulse, reflexes. The puppy whimpered once, a sound so faint it barely registered. "Good," Lina said softly. "That's good. Means there's still fight." Ethan followed them to the vehicle without asking if he could. No one told him not to. The ride to the veterinary clinic felt unreal. The city blurring past the windows, lights streaking across wet glass. The puppy lay between them, wrapped in foil-lined blankets, oxygen mask fitted gently over its small snout. Ethan sat rigid, hands clasped so tightly his knuckles ached. The clinic was bright, warm, and painfully clean. The smell of antiseptic hit him immediately, sharp and familiar in a way he didn't expect. He carried that scent somewhere deep in his memory. A woman met them at the door, already pulling on gloves. Dr. Hannah Price was in her late 40s, tall and angular, with silver-streaked blonde hair tied back into a low bun. Her face was calm, composed, the kind of calm earned through years of delivering bad news without breaking. She spoke gently, but with authority, her voice steady enough to anchor a room. "Let's move," she said, glancing once at Ethan. "You can come to the exam room." They placed the puppy into a heated enclosure. Tubes, wires, soft beeping monitors. The puppy's body seemed even smaller, surrounded by equipment designed for creatures much stronger than it. Dr. Price worked methodically, checking vitals, listening to the heart, palpating the limbs. She frowned slightly, not in alarm, but in concern that had learned restraint. "He's severely hypothermic," she said. "Dehydrated, malnourished, but no obvious fractures. That's something." Ethan nodded, though he wasn't sure what she expected him to do with the information. "Can he—" His voice faltered. He cleared his throat. "Will he live?" Dr. Price met his eyes directly. "Tonight is critical. The next few hours matter the most." The words landed with crushing familiarity. Ethan stepped back, pressing his palms against the counter. The room felt suddenly too small, too warm. His chest tightened, and the memory surged forward before he could stop it. Another room, another winter, another small body wrapped in blankets that weren't enough. He saw his daughter again, not as she had been in the hospital, but earlier that night. 5 years old, freckles across her nose, red knit hat slipping over one eye as she laughed in the back seat, snow whipping across the windshield. He had told her they'd be home soon, just a little longer. The storm had been worse than expected. Roads closed, traffic frozen. He had called for help. He had waited. By the time rescue arrived, her hands were cold. Ethan squeezed his eyes shut, breath shaking now despite his effort to control it. He hadn't cried then. He hadn't cried at the funeral either. Grief had hardened into something quiet and constant, something he carried without complaint. Now it cracked. "I should go," he said abruptly, turning away from the enclosure. "You've got him. He's safe now." Dr. Price watched him for a moment before speaking. "You can stay," she said. "You don't have to, but you can." Ethan shook his head. I was walking by, that's all." "Sometimes," she replied gently, "that's enough to change things." He didn't answer. He moved to the doorway, one hand on the frame. He told himself this was where he stepped back. This was where responsibility ended. He had done what any decent person would do. Behind him, the puppy shifted slightly in the enclosure. A soft, uneven breath escaped it. Ethan turned. The puppy's eyes were open, unfocused but searching. They landed on him, and for a brief, devastating moment, recognition flickered there. Not clarity, not understanding, but something quieter. Presence, awareness, waiting. Ethan felt it again, the same crushing weight he had felt standing on that frozen highway years ago. The sense that time was slipping, that choice was narrowing. "I'll stay," he said quietly, though he wasn't sure to whom he was speaking. He pulled a chair close to the enclosure and sat down, shoulders slumped, hands resting uselessly in his lap. Minutes passed, then more. Dr. Price and the staff moved around him, adjusting IV fluids, checking monitors, speaking in low voices. Ethan did not move. He watched the rise and fall of the puppy's chest, counting breaths without realizing it. Each one felt like a small victory. Each pause between them stretched too long. He told himself again and again that this didn't mean anything, that staying was just what you did when you were already there. But when the thought of leaving crossed his mind again, his chest tightened until he could barely breathe. And so he stayed. Noah survived the night. Dr. Price said it plainly, without ceremony, the morning after Ethan had dozed in the chair beside the heated enclosure. Survival, she explained, did not mean safety. It meant possibility. The puppy's body temperature had stabilized, but only barely. He was still dangerously underweight, still dehydrated, still fragile in a way that could not be measured by numbers alone. Ethan listened, nodded, thanked her, and stayed. Noah lay curled in the enclosure, a small golden shape against white padding. His fur had been cleaned and dried, revealing its natural color-soft, pale gold, lighter along the belly where skin showed through too easily. He was tiny for his breed, his paws oversized for the rest of him, as if he had been meant to grow into something sturdier, but had been interrupted. A thin IV line ran into his foreleg, wrapped carefully to keep him from pulling it loose. He did not lift his head when Ethan sat down, but his eyes opened. That was new. They followed Ethan as he lowered himself into the chair, slow and careful, as if sudden movement might startle something that could shatter. The eyes did not widen. They did not plead. They simply watched. Ethan felt something loosen in his chest. "Morning," he said quietly. Noah's ears twitched. One of them flopped sideways, refusing to cooperate. Ethan noticed that too. He noticed everything now. The way Noah's breathing slowed when he spoke. The way the puppy's body relaxed a fraction when Ethan didn't move closer. He didn't touch him. Not yet. That restraint surprised Ethan as much as anything else. He had expected to feel an urge to reach out, to reassure, to fix. Instead, he found himself holding back, instinctively aware that whatever existed between them was delicate. Touch might come later. Presence, it seemed, was enough for now. The staff moved around them throughout the day. Voices, footsteps, doors opening and closing. Noah startled at first, his body tensing whenever someone unfamiliar passed by. But when Ethan remained in his chair, unmoving, Noah settled again, eyes drifting back to him. By late afternoon, a young woman approached Ethan with a clipboard held against her chest. Her name was Rachel Kim, a shelter intake coordinator in her late 20s. She was petite, with straight black hair cut just below her jaw and clear, thoughtful eyes behind thin-framed glasses. Her posture was careful, polite in a way that suggested she had learned how to speak gently around grief animal and human alike. "He needs a temporary name," she said softly, "for the records." Ethan glanced at Noah, then back at Rachel. It doesn't have to mean anything," she added quickly. "Just something we can use." Ethan thought for a moment. He didn't know why the name came to him. Maybe because it was short. Maybe because it sounded steady. Maybe because it meant rest. "Noah," he said. Rachel smiled faintly. "All right, Noah it is." She wrote it down, thanked him, and left them alone again. The days that followed fell into a quiet pattern. Ethan returned every morning and every evening. Sometimes he brought coffee he didn't finish. Sometimes he sat in silence for hours, staring not at Noah, but at the space between them. He learned the rhythms of the clinic, the way the lights dimmed at night, the way voices softened after sunset. Noah grew stronger in increments so small they were easy to miss. He lifted his head more often. He shifted position without trembling. Once, when Ethan spoke, Noah's tail moved, a single uncertain flick, as if testing the idea of hope. Ethan didn't comment. He didn't smile. He only stayed. He found himself thinking about his daughter more often now. Not the way he usually did, with sharp flashes of guilt and memory, but with a strange, aching clarity. He remembered the way she used to watch him from her hospital bed when she was sick as a toddler, quiet and alert, taking comfort not from touch, but from knowing he was there. He had sat the same way then, still, afraid to move. One evening, as Ethan was leaving, he paused at the door. The thought of walking back into his empty apartment felt heavier than usual. He turned around. Noah was watching him. For the first time, Noah made a sound. Not a cry, not a whine, but a soft, breathy huff, barely audible. Ethan stopped mid-step. "I'll be back," he said, surprising himself with how certain it sounded. Noah's eyes did not close when Ethan left. They stayed on the door until it shut. That night, Ethan dreamed of snow falling indoors. On the third day, Dr. Price allowed Ethan to sit closer. Not inside the enclosure, not touching, but near enough that Noah could smell him. Ethan pulled his chair forward a few inches. Noah shifted toward the side of the enclosure nearest him. Ethan's throat tightened. "You're doing good," he whispered. Noah blinked slowly, a sign Dr. Price had explained meant relaxation, trust in its earliest form. Still, Ethan did not touch him. The restraint became its own kind of promise. Rachel stopped by again that afternoon. "You know," she said gently, "most people don't come back after the first night." Ethan nodded. "I know. Some can't," she added. "It's easier to help and leave." He didn't respond, because leaving had never been easy for him, just necessary. As the days passed, Noah's strength grew, but so did the tension beneath Ethan's calm exterior. He knew this could not last. The clinic was not a home. Decisions would have to be made: paperwork, transfers, limits. He pushed the thought aside each time it surfaced. For now, Noah was breathing. For now, Ethan was there. On the fifth evening, Noah stood. It was brief and unsteady. His legs shook, his body swayed, and he collapsed back onto the bedding with a soft, startled sound. But he had stood. Ethan rose halfway from his chair before catching himself. He sat back down slowly, hands clenched. "Easy," he murmured, voice barely steady. Noah looked at him, eyes bright with effort and something like confusion. He did not try again. Ethan stayed long after the staff had finished their rounds. He watched the snow begin to fall outside the clinic windows, thick and silent, turning the world white once more. The same snow, a different moment. He told himself he was not reliving the past. He was simply not turning away this time. And when Noah finally slept deeply, without twitching, chest rising and falling in an even rhythm, Ethan remained in his chair, afraid that leaving might undo something fragile that had only just begun to exist. The notice came quietly. No alarms, no raised voices, just a folded sheet of paper clipped to Noah's chart and a careful knock on the glass that separated Ethan from the small recovery room. Rachel Kim stood there when Ethan looked up. Her posture was different this time, less tentative, shoulders drawn inward, as if she were bracing herself. The fluorescent light washed her skin pale, emphasizing the dark circles beneath her eyes. She held the clipboard tighter than usual, fingers tense around its edge. "Ethan," she said softly, "can we talk?" He nodded, already feeling the change in the air. They stepped into the hallway. The clinic smelled faintly of disinfectant and warm fur, a combination that had begun to feel almost normal. Rachel lowered her voice. "There's been a review," she said, "because of Noah's condition." Ethan's jaw tightened. "What kind of review?" She exhaled slowly. "Medical capacity, resources, long-term care." He understood immediately. He had lived long enough to recognize the language people used when they were preparing you for loss. "They're moving him," Ethan said. Rachel didn't argue. She didn't soften it. She only nodded. "To a facility outside the city," she explained. "They handle high-volume cases. It's not ideal, but they're better equipped on paper." On paper. Ethan looked back through the glass. Noah lay curled on his side, chest rising and falling in shallow but steady breaths. His fur caught the light now, golden and clean, deceptively healthy. Only someone who had watched him as closely as Ethan had would notice how carefully he conserved energy, how every movement was calculated. "When?" Ethan asked. "Tomorrow night," Rachel said. "If he remains stable." The word hit him harder than he expected. Stable. It sounded safe. It wasn't. Ethan didn't remember saying thank you. He only remembered sitting back down in his chair, hands clasped so tightly they shook. Rachel lingered a moment, then left him alone. Noah stirred. His eyes opened and found Ethan immediately. That was how it always happened now. Ethan leaned forward, resting his forearms on his knees. He didn't speak. He was afraid that if he did, something in his voice would give him away. He told himself this wasn't his decision to make. Noah was not his responsibility. He had not asked for this bond. He had not chosen it. But the truth pressed in on him from all sides. He had chosen it the moment he stayed. That night, the storm returned. Snow thickened against the windows, wind rattling the frames hard enough to make the lights flicker. The clinic grew quieter as the hours passed, staff moving with subdued urgency. Ethan remained in his chair, coat still on, refusing to leave. Noah's breathing changed first. It wasn't dramatic, no sudden collapse, just a subtle shift, a quickening, a shallow hitch that didn't smooth itself out. Ethan noticed immediately. "Hey," he whispered, standing. "Hey, easy." Noah's body trembled. His legs drew inward, muscles tightening without direction. A thin sound escaped him, barely audible, more breath than voice. Ethan pressed the call button with shaking fingers. The response was immediate. Dr. Price arrived within seconds, her calm exterior sharpening into something fierce and focused. She moved to Noah's side, checking vitals, issuing quiet instructions to a nurse Ethan hadn't seen before, a tall man with a shaved head and careful hands, his name badge reading Mark Feldman. Mark moved efficiently, jaw set, eyes steady, the kind of man who had learned to function under pressure without asking questions. "Respiratory distress," Dr. Price said. "Temperature's dropping again." Ethan stepped back, heart hammering. This was it. This was the moment he had never escaped. He watched as oxygen was adjusted, as Noah's small body jerked in uneven spasms, muscles betraying him. The room blurred at the edges, sound dulling as memories surged forward. Snow against glass, a car that wouldn't move, a child's hands growing cold in his. He leaned against the wall, sliding down until he was crouched, arms wrapped around himself. His breath came too fast, too shallow. He closed his eyes, but the images only sharpened. He had stood outside a different room once before, had waited while strangers worked on someone he loved, had been told to stay back, had obeyed, and then it had been too late. "Ethan." He looked up. Dr. Price stood a few feet away, her gloves stained, her expression unreadable. "He's fighting," she said, "but he's very weak." Ethan nodded, though his vision swam. "I can't." His voice broke. He swallowed hard. "I can't do this again." She studied him for a long moment. "You're not doing this to him," she said carefully. "You're here." That wasn't the same thing. The seizure passed, leaving Noah limp and exhausted. His breathing steadied, but only just. The monitors quieted to a tense, watchful rhythm. Dr. Price stepped out to make calls. Ethan stayed where he was, unable to move. Hours passed in fragments. Snow piled higher outside. The world narrowed to the sound of Noah's breathing and the echo of Ethan's own thoughts, circling the same question over and over. If you step forward, you risk losing him. If you step back, you already have. Near dawn, the storm eased. The light that crept through the windows was pale and cold, reflecting off fresh snow. Noah slept, deeply but unevenly, his small body finally still. Ethan stood and approached the enclosure. He stopped inches away. His hand hovered over the glass, trembling. He remembered another moment like this, standing at a bedside, afraid that touch might make goodbye real. Afraid that connection was something the universe would punish. Slowly, deliberately, he lowered his hand. He didn't touch Noah, but he didn't pull away either. "I don't know how to do this," he whispered.
"I don't know how to stay."
Noah slept on. Ethan straightened, exhaustion pressing down on him like weight. The decision loomed closer now, no longer abstract, no longer avoidable. He had until tomorrow night. Until then, he would sit with the question he had avoided his entire life. What happens if this time you don't stand outside? Noah made it through the night. That was how Dr. Price phrased it when Ethan returned to the clinic just after dawn. Not, he's better, not, he's safe, just that narrow statement, balanced carefully between hope and warning. Noah lay in the enclosure, breathing on his own now, chest rising and falling in uneven but determined rhythms. His body looked impossibly small against the padding, ribs faintly visible beneath the pale gold fur. Ethan stood there longer than necessary, hands buried deep in his coat pockets, as if anchoring himself in place. His temperature held, Dr. Price continued, but he's still critical. The next few days will matter. Ethan nodded. He had learned by now what those words meant. They meant waiting. They meant uncertainty. They meant that survival came with conditions. Rachel Kim joined them a moment later. Her hair was pulled back loosely today, strands escaping near her temples, her face drawn with fatigue. She looked at Noah first, then at Ethan. "There's something we need to discuss," she said. They moved into a small office off the hallway. The room was cramped, functional metal desk, 2 chairs, a faded poster about responsible pet adoption taped crookedly to the wall. Rachel closed the door behind them. "The board reviewed Noah's case this morning," she said, "because of his medical needs." Ethan felt his stomach tighten. "They're asking you to decide," she continued. "If you want to foster or adopt him, you'll need to assume full medical responsibility, ongoing treatment, follow-ups, costs, everything." "And if I don't?" Ethan asked, though he already knew. Rachel hesitated. "He'll be transferred to the regional facility tomorrow evening." Ethan leaned back in his chair. The metal creaked beneath his weight. "That place," he stopped himself. "You said it wasn't ideal." "It's not," she admitted. "They're overwhelmed, high volume, limited staff per case." "But on paper," Ethan said quietly, "it looks fine." Rachel met his eyes. "On paper, yes." Silence filled the room. Ethan stared at the desk, at a small crack running through its surface like a fault line. He thanked her, stood, and walked out before she could say anything else. He did not go back to Noah's enclosure right away. Instead, he left the building and sat in his car. Snow covered the parking lot in uneven drifts, crunching softly beneath passing tires. Ethan turned the engine on but didn't drive. He rested his forehead against the steering wheel, breath fogging the windshield. This was the moment. Not the rescue, not the night in the park. This. He closed his eyes and memory rose without permission. His daughter's face came to him not as she had looked at the end, but as she had been before, the way she used to sit in the back seat, knees tucked up, humming to herself. The way she trusted him completely, never questioning whether he could keep her safe. He remembered the moment he had stopped trying. The phone call, the operator's calm voice, the words, "Help is on the way," repeated like a lullaby. And the moment, hours later, when he had let go of her hand, because his arm had gone numb and he thought, "I can't do anything more." The guilt had never left him. It had simply gone quiet. Now it screamed. Inside the clinic, Noah slept, unaware of the weight placed on a decision he could not understand. His life balanced on a question Ethan had avoided his entire adult life. What happens if you choose to stay? Ethan stayed in the car until the cold seeped through his coat and into his bones. Then he went back inside. He sat beside Noah again, the familiar chair creaking beneath him. Noah stirred faintly, eyes opening, unfocused but searching. Ethan leaned forward. "They want me to decide," he said softly, knowing Noah could not understand the words, but believing somehow that he could understand the truth behind them. Noah's tail did not wag. He did not lift his head. He only breathed. Ethan watched the slow rise and fall of Noah's chest and felt the decision tighten around him like a noose. He didn't sleep that night. Instead, he sat in the waiting area while the clinic dimmed around him, staff moving quietly through routines practiced enough to be gentle. At some point, a woman sat down a few chairs away. Her name was Linda Parker, a volunteer coordinator in her early 50s. She was tall and thin, her gray hair pulled into a loose braid that rested over one shoulder. Her face bore the kind of lines that came from years of concern rather than age, her eyes kind but guarded. "You look like someone carrying more than one thing," she said after a while. Ethan gave a short, humorless laugh. "That obvious?" She nodded. "It always is." They spoke quietly. Not about Noah, not about adoption, just about winter, about how long it felt this year, about how loss had a way of returning when you thought it was done with you. Linda didn't offer advice. She didn't push. She only listened. That somehow made it harder. By morning, Ethan's body ached with exhaustion, but his mind was sharp in a painful, relentless way. Rachel found him near the enclosure just after sunrise. "We'll need an answer today," she said gently. Ethan nodded. He spent the day pacing between the enclosure and the hallway, unable to sit still now that time had a shape. Noah woke briefly, drank a few milliliters of water, then slept again. Each small sign of strength felt like a question rather than an answer. By evening, the snow began again. Ethan returned to his car once more. He sat there, engine off this time, cold seeping in unchecked. He pictured his apartment, empty, quiet, safe in its own way. He pictured Noah there, fragile, dependent, a living reminder that love did not come without risk. The thought terrified him. He pressed his palms together until they hurt. If he said yes, he risked loss. If he said no, he guaranteed it. The clinic lights glowed behind him, steady and indifferent. Inside, Noah slept, unaware that his fate rested in the hands of a man who had already lost more than he believed he could survive again. Ethan opened the car door. Snow drifted in, cold and sharp. He stepped out and walked back toward the building, heart pounding, not with certainty, but with fear sharpened into something close to resolve. Ethan arrived at the shelter before sunrise. The city was still half asleep, streets buried beneath a fresh layer of snow that reflected the early light in pale blues and silvers. The clinic windows glowed softly against the dark, a quiet island of warmth in the cold morning. Ethan sat in his car for a moment, hands resting on the steering wheel, breathing steadily. He felt strangely calm now, as if the storm inside him had already passed and left something solid behind. He stepped out into the cold and walked inside. Rachel Kim was at the front desk, a mug of coffee cupped between her hands. She looked up, surprise flickering across her face before settling into understanding. "You're early," she said. "I know," Ethan replied. She studied him for a second longer, then nodded. "Come on." They went into the small office again, the same one with the crooked adoption poster. The morning light revealed scuffs on the floor, fingerprints on the glass signs of lives passing through. Rachel placed a folder on the desk and slid it toward him. "This is everything," she said. medical responsibility, foster to adopt agreement, emergency consent. Ethan opened the folder. His hands did not shake. He read carefully, line by line. The words were heavy but clear. Costs, risks, no guarantees. He signed his name where indicated, the pen scratching softly against paper. Rachel let out a breath she seemed to have been holding. "I'll tell Dr. Price." When Ethan stood, his legs felt steady beneath him. The fear was still there, but it no longer ruled him. It sat quietly, acknowledged but no longer obeyed. Dr. Price met him outside Noah's room. She looked tired, her hair pulled back hastily, faint shadows beneath her eyes. But when she smiled, it was real. "You're sure?" she asked. Ethan nodded. "Yes." She stepped aside. "Then he's yours." Noah was awake. His eyes followed Ethan as he approached, alert in a way they hadn't been before. The fourth line was gone now, replaced by a small bandage on his leg. His breathing was slow and careful, but steadier. Ethan reached in and lifted him. Noah was warm, still light, still fragile, but undeniably alive. His heart fluttered rapidly beneath Ethan's palm, a small, persistent rhythm that grounded him in the present. Noah pressed his head weakly against Ethan's chest, releasing a soft, tired sound that might have been a sigh. Ethan closed his eyes. "I've got you," he whispered. They didn't linger long. Instructions were given, supplies gathered. A young technician, Emily Shore, barely in her 20s, with freckles and nervous energy, handed Ethan a small bag of medication and explained dosing twice, her voice careful and earnest. "You'll need to keep him warm," she said. "Quiet. No stairs. No visitors." Ethan listened. He absorbed everything. The drive home was slow. Snow fell again, lighter this time, drifting across the windshield like ash. Noah lay bundled on the passenger seat, wrapped in a blanket, his body rising and falling with each breath. He didn't look out the window. He watched Ethan. Ethan glanced over once, then again. The sight filled something hollow in him. His apartment was small, one bedroom, clean but sparsely furnished. Neutral colors, no photographs on the walls. The kind of place designed not to hold memories. Ethan laid Noah gently on a pile of blankets near the radiator. He adjusted the heat, set out water, checked the time for medication. His movements were deliberate, focused. Noah curled inward, tail tucked close, eyes half closed. Ethan sat beside him. Hours passed quietly. Snow built up against the windows. The city hummed distantly. Ethan stayed where he was, back against the couch, one hand resting near Noah's small body, not touching, just close enough to be felt. That night, Noah's breathing faltered once. Ethan noticed immediately. He leaned forward, heart pounding, counting breaths until they steadied again. When Noah finally slept deeply, his chest rising and falling in a slow, even rhythm, Ethan allowed himself to exhale. He did not sleep. Morning came pale and cold. Sunlight spilled across the floor, catching in Noah's fur and turning it gold. Noah stirred, lifting his head for the first time without effort. His eyes found Ethan. This time, his tail moved. Just once. Just enough. Ethan laughed softly, surprised by the sound. It came out rough, unused. "You're still here," he said. Noah blinked slowly. The days that followed were quiet and demanding. Ethan adjusted his routine without thinking. He took time off work. He learned how to prepare soft food, how to wrap Noah in towels after warming baths, how to listen for subtle changes in breathing. He set alarms through the night. Noah grew stronger in increments so small they could only be noticed by someone watching closely. He began to stand without shaking. He followed Ethan from room to room, never far, always within sight. One evening, as Ethan sat on the floor, Noah climbed into his lap and curled there, fitting perfectly. The contact was sudden and unplanned. Ethan froze, then slowly rested his arms around the small body. Noah sighed. Ethan felt the weight of him real, present, alive, and something inside him finally gave way. Not in pain, in release. He thought of his daughter then, not with the sharpness of regret, but with a gentler understanding. He had not failed by choosing to stay now. He had learned. That night, as snow fell softly outside, Noah slept with his head against Ethan's chest, breath warm and steady. Ethan remained awake, listening, anchored by the simple truth of another living heart beside his own. He did not know what the future held. He only knew that this time he had not stepped back. Sometimes miracles do not arrive with thunder or light from the sky. Sometimes they arrive quietly, tied to a tree in the cold, breathing weakly, waiting for someone who chooses not to walk away. Perhaps God does not always remove the storm. Perhaps He sends us into it, so we can become shelter for someone else. In our everyday lives, we pass by so many quiet cries, moments where we could stop, moments where kindness costs us comfort, moments where love asks us to stay, even when we are afraid of losing again. If this story touched your heart, let it remind you that no act of compassion is ever wasted. What you save today may one day save you in return. Please share this story so it can reach someone who needs hope. Leave a comment below. Your words might be the encouragement someone else is praying for. And if you believe that no soul is forgotten in God's eyes, subscribe to the channel and stay with us. May God bless you, protect you, and guide your steps, especially when love asks you to stop, kneel down, and choose to stay.